Recently, I had an assignment, or my first assignment, fresh out of lockdown here in Hanoi, Vietnam, for an international NGO, and they specialize in forensic data for wildlife crime. So I want to tell you a little bit about that assignment, give you some insight about the assignment from start to finish, and I'll touch on things such as how I got the assignment, what the assignment was, how I approached the assignment, how much I got paid for the assignment, what I delivered for the assignment, and I'll end with showing you some pictures from the assignment. So let's talk about what it's like to do an assignment. So as always, guys, don't forget to check out my online store at justinmott.com, where I've got presets starting as low as $4.99 that will not make you a better photographer, but they will add some pop to your images. I've also got prints starting as low as $99 with free shipping worldwide. They make great wall art, something I always say I need right behind me here, but I don't want to distract from my beautiful face here. Just kidding, as you know. And I've got my one-on-one sessions via Zoom for all levels and all genres of photographers out there, starting as low as $99 for 1 hour. You can book everything at justinmott.com. So I get assignments from all different types of places. My commercial work and my editorial work, I get it from referrals, I get it from reputation, I get it from Google searches, so you can't underestimate the value of having good SEO baked into your website, so make sure you have that. I did a whole separate episode about photographers and their websites. You can check that out in the link right here. I used to get assignments through agencies, although that's something that doesn't really happen as much as the business model for agencies doesn't really work as well as it used to. I get assignments through social media now as well. Sometimes people contact me directly through Instagram or on Facebook, or sometimes I just see posts on Facebook, as was the case here. Well, this was kind of a combination of a post on Facebook and a referral. So the post was from a woman who works for a forensic lab here in Hanoi. They're an international NGO, but they have a lab here. They wanted images specifically for the lab here in Vietnam. She didn't seem to have a budget. She wasn't really shy about saying that. She was very honest, and I appreciate it. She was very polite as well. She said, don't really have a budget for this, or don't have much of a budget. So it's kind of like they might have little to no money. And they also threw out that like it could be good for someone's portfolio, or it could be good, we'll give you credit, that kind of thing, which a lot of photographers take offense to. And I totally understand that. And usually that's a big giant red flag. And for most photographers out there, they'll just turn away right away. Or they'll actually like shame the person and be mad at it. I don't take that approach. She was very nice about her statement. I appreciate her honesty. Now, another note, also notice, even though she had zero to no budget, or at least that's what she stated on the Facebook post, I saw tons of photographers interested. So I was even like an hour late to the post, and there was all sorts of people posting, sharing other photographers' work, sharing their own work, just a lot of people interested. And even for a job like this, of course, we're in lockdown for so long, so a lot of people were desperate. But often when I see a post for any paid work or even free work, I see a lot of photographers out there. So it's a nice reminder, or a bad reminder, about how saturated the market is out there and how many people are willing to work for nothing or very little. And while as a established pro photographer, I did see a lot of red flags there. A lot of people probably wouldn't be interested in this, but rather than shame her, rather than get mad like a lot of pro photographers I know would, and like say something like, I can't get paid in credit, I can't pay my bills in credit, I understand that, but she wasn't being rude. She was just sort of putting it out there. A lot of people just don't know what we make, don't know what we charge, and in her defense, there's a lot of people out there that will do it for free. So, I can't really blame people for asking. So it doesn't mean you have to shame them, and it also doesn't mean you can't turn that into a sale. It doesn't mean that you can't educate someone. It doesn't mean you can't get a paid job out of this, because I did, and here's how. So I took the conversation privately. I shared my work. I shared my relative work. Instead of just sharing just like random portraits or travel pictures, I shared my work on the northern white rhinos. I shared my kindred guardians work. I showed all my wildlife work. So I led with that, and then I also shared, kind of threw it in there. I didn't leave like a long bio, but I shared some of my clients that might impress her, the New York Times, the Washington Post, and then some of my NGO clients that were relative to her, sharing Greenpeace and WWF and things like that. I know not everybody out there, especially early on in your career, you have those clients, but for me, I did, so I shared it. I share whatever's relative. Like when you're trying to get work like this, share your interests, share your passion, and then share the relative information. So before I talked about money, I led with that work. I shared some of my work. I said, hey, listen, I'd like to talk about this assignment. I'm interested. Here's my work. And she got back to me right away. She's like, wow, this is impressive. And I was, yeah, I know. I mean, I have shot for impressive clients, and I have done this a lot, so I was hoping she would be impressed. I was hoping that would set me above all the other people that posted it, because a lot of people also just write like, I'm interested, don't lead with the work. Like, don't make the client do the work. You do the work for them. You're trying to get this work. You're trying to get a paid assignment. So after I knew she was impressed, I just sort of briefly discussed like what I would realistically normally make for an editorial assignment, and that's kind of how I was going to treat this. Even though this was an NGO and could be considered more like a commercial job, I said, listen, I would shoot this in an editorial way, and normally for an editorial assignment, I'd make about $500 a day, and for an NGO job, I might make between $500 to $700 a day. And that's not including expenses. But I said for this, it's very close by. I could just take my motorcycle over there, so we don't have to worry about expenses there. And I just made it simple for them. I made it easy for her to digest. I said, so I could do this because I'm interested in the work, because I'm interested in the work, and I also understand you have a budget. Maybe you can meet me halfway or somewhere about halfway. So I said, I could do this for about $350 and spend a couple hours there. And she said she had to check, she talked to her boss, and she got back to me, she's like, yeah, we can do this. So, that just turned something that couldn't be a sale. I'm not saying it's a great, wonderfully paid job. It's not a ton of money, but something I'm interested in, something I wanted to do. And again, I turned a client that wasn't willing to pay anything or didn't think they wanted to pay anything into someone that's willing to pay me like a normal, respectable rate for editorial style and just for a few hours worth of work. And that's really where a lot of photographers go wrong, is finding that happy medium. The amateurs or people that don't value the work, they just want to give it away and don't even talk about price or don't even talk about their value, don't even value themselves. So they just immediately will do it for free, and you could have missed out on a possible paid job. And now the pros will see the red flags and they'll either just ignore it, which is okay. I mean, I understand that, ignoring it. Or they'll shame the person publicly, or they'll write an email to them and sort of patronize them, or they'll talk about their highest paid job. I normally make $5,000, so how could you dare want me to do this for a few $100s? No one wants to hear that. So again, I just politely explained kind of what I realistically normally would make for a job like this, what I was hoping to make for this kind of job, and to see if she could find a budget for it. That's what I asked. I just asked her, I said, perhaps you can check around, see if you could find a budget for something like this, and she did, and I got the job. So it's kind of as easy as that. It doesn't always work out that way, but honestly, more times than you think, it actually does. So she found the budget, and then we got the ball rolling, and again, a job like this, even though it's small for me relative to my larger commercial jobs, we have producers, assistants, models, and things like that, I still treat it professionally. I still treat it like a professional job. I still do all the same things, still have a contract, still talk about the scope of work, still explain things, still have a conversation beforehand. And that's another mistake people make often. It's oh, it's not as much as I usually make, so I'm going to do a crap job on this. Or it's not well paid, so I'm still going to do a bad job. That's such a bad attitude to have. I never take that approach. So yeah, still had a contract. Rather than doing scouting, because she didn't have a budget for that, I always like to do scouting, but there was no budget. That's my time. My time is money. So I just asked them, just so I could have an idea of what I'm getting myself into, and I know what equipment to bring. I asked if she could take some photos with her phone, and she did, and that was actually helpful because it sort of guided me on what I needed to bring and what I didn't need to bring as far as lighting goes. And since it's a commercial shoot, but it was more of an editorial style rate, I actually did talk to her about the style of the shoot, because that's another important thing to really get out right away, just to save you from headaches down the line. Like I said, listen, because of the budget, I said I'd approach this like I would an editorial assignment or a New York Times assignment, like something if someone hired me to document your work about what you guys are doing for a story. And you can assume that people know what that means, and they normally don't. And I said, well, I also explained what that means. I said, what that means is I'm going to shoot it very naturally. Of course, we can set things up. If this was a story, if this was a New York Times assignment or something like that, I wouldn't set it up. I would go there, of course, with their approval, and I would shoot it as it is. I wouldn't be setting things up. But since this was more commercial style, we would set things up, make sure everything was nice. Wouldn't be using a ton of lighting, wouldn't be using hair and makeup and things like that. So I explained that so they understood. I said, listen, I'm going to have you guys do what you normally do. We're going to set it up to make it look nicely, but I'm going to shoot it in a natural way. So meaning we're going to use natural light for mostly everything. Because again, they didn't have a budget. If we start to bring in a bunch of lighting, we start to have this really extensive shot list, it's going to be a really long day. It's going to be a lot of retouching later on. And that's not what they had a budget for. I'd be happy to do something like that if they had a budget. So it's important to have these conversations ahead of time. It's important to explain to people, don't ever assume. It's important, it's imperative to explain what's going to happen before, what's going to happen during the shoot, how many hours you're going to be there for, and then what's going to happen afterwards as far as retouching and the deliverables and the deadline and the schedule for the deliverables and all that. For this kind of job and the kind of scope of work that she wanted, she didn't have a real direct shot list. She said, I just want some basics about the laboratory, just, kind of showing the work that we do. So I said, okay, could probably get that done in an hour and a half or so, but I put in about 3 hours just in case. I just figured I'd work it. You never know, things are going to come up, might have some other ideas for shots. So went there for about 3 hours. Since it was more editorial style, I brought my editorial style kit, which was my Leica M10D with my 35mm. I brought my 21mm for backup in case I needed sort of a wide shot of the lab because I knew it was kind of small. And I also brought my 75mm for some details with my Leica M10. So I had 2 cameras and 3 different lenses. And also, just for backup for a couple portraits at the end, I also brought an aperture light. By the way, I love those aperture constant lights. They're very, very affordable. They pack up really nicely and the build quality is really nice. I typically used Pro Photo in the past for all that, but I just like constant light. I'm really digging it. I really like the products that Aperture has. This is not a paid sponsorship by any means. I've just been using their products in our home studio and I've been using it on location from time to time. I really, really dig their products. So for something like this, since they were operating on normal business hours, they're there at 9 o'clock in the morning, they work until 5. I did notice that there's not gonna get much natural light at all, if any, so I wasn't really worried about going there super early or going there for sunset, because I just wasn't gonna get that light coming through. It was only small windows and they weren't gonna get direct light in there. So we showed up around 11 o'clock. Basically, when I got there, toward the 2 main rooms I have, just really small labs, really, really visually boring, nothing that they did wrong, but just a couple of pieces of lab equipment, a few lab technicians, and just like some boring rooms with bad fluorescent light. But I knew what I was getting into because I had those scouting pictures, so I knew what to expect. I just kind of basically talk through their work, do as much research as possible so you understand what they're trying to get. Again, since this wasn't like a really expensive commercial shoot, we didn't have a comprehensive shot list. I just kind of went there and said, what are you hoping to capture? What's important here? What's not? It's very, very important to have a conversation, right? Like as photographers, we take a lot of liberties. We go in there and we just think visually, but when you're doing something like this, whether it's an editorial assignment or even a commercial assignment, you have to think about what's accurate. So I have a conversation with them. I say, can we clean this up? Would that make sense? Can we put the person here? That kind of stuff. Again, if this was an editorial assignment, I'm not placing people or moving people around. I'm going to do it very naturally. But since this is a commercial assignment, I'm doing it for them. They want it to be accurate, but I'm okay with moving things around. I'm okay with setting the stage. I'm okay with asking this person to stand here, this person to do that. I want everything to be clean and neat, but I also want everything to be accurate. So all those little things are important as well. I see photographers, again, do this all the time. They set things up because they think they're gonna look visually, but they actually don't know anything about what they're shooting. So for example, like the way someone holds a certain tool, the way they use a certain instrument, or the way they're using the lab equipment, that kind of stuff. Like you might think as a photographer, oh, it'd be good for them to have 2 hands like this or tick it and put it there, but they're in this field. Other people are going to look at what they do, like donors are looking at this, or for their bosses looking at stuff. They know how things are being used, so it's important that you're accurate there as well. So every time I would create a scene, even though I would shoot in a very editorial way, I'd say, like, how do you normally do this? How do you normally sit? How do you normally work with the items you're working with? How do you normally work with this instrument? And what will you normally do? I asked them to see it so I can visually sort of think through the steps. And then I shoot it, and then I'm okay with, okay, can you redo that? Can you sit here? Can you do that? But I'm always asking the client for clarity. I'm always asking them for accuracy. One, it's just gonna save you headaches later on. So, again, a lot of people don't speak up. Like, they're not gonna speak up in the moment. Some don't. So, like, you're gonna have this picture where someone's holding, like, a tool that shouldn't be holding it that way, and then they can't use the image afterwards because then they don't look professional. And then you don't look professional. So I'm always asking people about how they normally do things. I'm always double checking with things about accuracy and just process and things like that. And not just that, it's just clients also appreciate that. You've asked them to be inclusive, and it makes you look better because you care about details, or you should actually care about details. So all in all, I was there for about 2.5 to 3 hours. I shot the 2 different labs, as many different scenes as I could, trying different things with different layers, different details, putting my camera in every single nook and cranny in that place, seeing what I could shoot through, what I could shoot through with context, just like trying to get the most out of it. I want to deliver them as much variety as possible, so then later on, when they've got their annual reports or they're designing the website, that their designer has a lot to work with. So I spent a couple hours in both labs, did a few portraits, and then ended with some shots of them actually working and doing some forensic work, which was a really interesting part for me, where they were actually getting some samples from a tusk and then some samples from a skull as well. Those were really, really interesting parts for me. Those are parts I could maybe possibly work for my personal project, Kindred Guardians. I really like those images, so those I can use for myself. Again, I agreed with this ahead of time. I asked them ahead of time. That's another thing that's important to clarify. I said, listen, for this price, I'd also need to be able to use the images on my website to be able to use them for my personal project. They agreed. At first, they wanted to flat out own all the images. I should have said that earlier. They actually said, we had a bad experience before, we want to own the images. And I said, well, it doesn't really work that way with photographers. I'm going to maintain the copyright to my images, but you can use them as well. And then you can arrange, depending on what you're working with, depending on your market, commercial, editorial work, and agree on, they can use them in perpetuity. You can agree on licensing for a certain amount of years. That's all different based on region, based on contract, and based on the particular client. So for this particular case, I said, you guys can use them however you want, wherever you want, but I can use them as well. Again, All that stuff should be clarified before the shoot ever happens. That should all be done in your contract. So overall, the day, it wasn't that visual. The client was really, really nice and very, very helpful. And I was also inspired by her passion for her work, or all the people that work there, all their passion for the work. I really enjoy that. That always pushes me that like extra mile to try like the other corner of the room, or to try that different layered shot, or try to frame through something. It just pushes me. I really get inspired by people that care about the work. Obviously, I was interested in this work, so that helped as well. But overall, it wasn't that visual. You know, it's just lab equipment and people using lab equipment. So it's difficult to get beautiful photographs. Probably none of these images are gonna make it in my portfolio, but some of the images at the end of them actually working with the elephant tusk, they were also collecting samples from a skeleton, which looked like a predator. They couldn't really, since it was an ongoing case, they couldn't talk about the specifics of it, but it's kind of obvious it was a predator by the teeth of the animal. But very interesting work they were doing. I had a really great time. I'm really glad I took on the assignment. I'm glad I took a moment to actually talk to the person, because again, a lot of photographers, even myself, often you're turned off by that. People saying, you know, work for credit or work for your portfolio or something like that. It's immediate turn off. But I sensed that the lady was genuine. I sensed she was passionate about her work. I sensed that she just didn't understand the value of photographer's work, or just didn't have a budget and was just being honest about it. I just appreciate that. So I had a private conversation, again, being nice, being polite, just communicating with people, having a dialogue. It's amazing how much that can help. So again, I ended up getting paid for the assignment. In the end, they were very happy with the images. The process that we did for this kind of work, since it was commercial work, basically, I didn't do a deposit because it wasn't enough time for them to process the payment. I was okay with that. Again, for a larger job, a lot of moving parts, where I'm flying places and have many different people and renting equipment, dealing with models, yes, I'd want a deposit. For something like this, you know, only a couple miles away from me, didn't have a problem taking the job without a deposit. It's just kind of a pain to process that twice. But what we did was finish the job. A couple days later, I sent them, for something like this, to do about 50 to 100 photographs. I can shoot a lot when I'm shooting natural light and editorial style, so I gave about 50 to 100 images, let them use all of them. That's just my approach in something like this, but they were as is. Like, I'm not gonna do retouching notes on something like this. Again, they knew that, so no headaches later on. They're not gonna go through each image, oh, I want this one, can you remove this? No. They knew that ahead of time, we agreed on all that, so they were retouched as is. I did some basic color correction to the images, just basically my toning to the images. So deliver the images as is, basic toning, no retouching, meaning no removing or adding things or anything like that. And then once I'm done, I come home, and the first thing I do, I don't like ever lollygag at all when I come home. First thing I do is back up the images in multiple places, get them on 2 different hard drives, put those 2 hard drives in 2 different physical places, just, you never know. So, you know, even for a job like this, not that big, it's not the money, it's more the principle. I don't want to ever be in a situation where I have to reshoot something like that because I lost it. The next day, I usually take a day, depends if I'm on a deadline for an editorial assignment, I've got to do it that night, of course I do, but I had a couple days. Usually I did a deadline for this of about a week, but got them done about 3 days later. And then for something like this, I'm not going to give you a preview, I'm not going to give you the final images until I get the payment, no matter what, no exceptions. Friends, whatever, even though the person you dealt with, this person was very, very nice, often they're not the person that's gonna send you the money. Someone in accounting is, and they don't care about what agreement you made. So I don't give a preview because like you hired me to do this type of work. I don't want any sort of reason for, you know, who knows, they could have lost their budget, or this person, they didn't really ask for approval for the budget, now they don't have it, and they thought it was gonna be this type of images, forget it. I just don't put myself in those situations. We don't, as much as people ask, as much nice as people are, they're often the people that aren't making that decision about the money, so I just don't take any chances, even for a smaller job like this. So once we get the final payment, which actually happened quite quickly because they needed the images, it's amazing how quickly people will pay you when they don't have the product yet, when they want it. You know, when you give it to them and they have it already and they're using it already, payment can go on for a long time. It's not a priority to them. So, you know, it just serves you well to do it this way, and I think it's a fair trade for both people. We did get paid right away. The client was very happy. I was pleased with the shoot. Again, it's a tough shoot. I'm not gonna get like portfolio images out of this. It's a small, boring lab, not like their fault it's boring. It's just labs are typically kind of boring, or most labs are. I mean, it's just a small place with some basic lab equipment, a couple people working there. So it wasn't like really that interesting for me, for my portfolio, but it's interesting because I like the kind of work they're doing. I believe in the kind of work they're doing. It's also fun just to challenge yourself to work in a small cramped space like that, try to create creative images in a situation like that. In the end, they were really happy, and in the end, you never know, this could lead to other work, and if it does lead to other work, they already kind of know my pricing, so, you know, I don't have to have that discussion again. So I'm interested in the kind of work they're doing, so who knows, this could lead to more jobs or lead to a referral, because I think it was a good experience for them, it was a good experience for me. Overall, I'm glad I took on the job. Overall, I'm glad that I didn't just see the red flag and run away. I'm glad I had a dialogue. I'm glad I had a conversation with a woman on Facebook about it. And it was just a nice shoot. It was a nice shoot to start fresh out of the lockdown. Just wanted to share that experience with you guys. I know a lot of you are just starting out in your career and might, be interested in some of this insight on what goes into a normal shoot. This was kind of like a hybrid shoot. It's like an NGO/editorial commercial job. And it's a commercial client, but shot in an editorial way. So I thought you'd enjoy the experience. I thought you'd enjoy the process. So I just wanted to share that with you guys. And all of you, don't forget to submit to my weekly assignment challenge, which I have every single week. It's free. We have great prizes. We have a grand prize at the end of the year for Photo of the Year of a Wotan Craft Pilot Series camera bag. It is an amazing camera bag. Best picture of the year is going to win that bag. You can check out all the affiliate links if you want to learn more about Wotan Craft in the description box below. Thank you guys for tuning in. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and have a wonderful day.